What's going on, guys, and happy Memorial Day. Cameron and Bryant here for Rewind number 26, WWE Judgment Day 2008. Before we get into the show, I'd like to take the time and run through some reminders. First of all, if you have not yet, be sure to check out our most recent show, which is our AEW Double or Nothing 2020 review and recap. That was Sunday afternoon show. And also go ahead and give our Judgment Day 2007 show for Rewind number 25 a listen as well. Coming up next week, we'll have our final Rewind show for May of 2020 with Rewind number 27, WWE One Night Stand 2008, which I actually never thought of before, but we're doing this show here, and we're going to be doing that show next week. And I remember that there was like a 2-week span or something like that in between those shows, something nowadays that they still, I guess, haven't learned from doing. So we have this show here, then that show next week, although it'll be back on Sunday. We switched up the order this week because of the AEW pay-per-view being on Saturday night, and I think that's the way we're going to do it for those, I guess, from here on out, unless we can come up with something better. And there's like 4 AEW pay-per-views a year, so for next week's show, we're going to see Shawn Michaels versus Batista in a stretcher match, John Cena versus JBL in a First Blood match, Triple H versus Randy Orton in a Last Man Standing match for the WWE Championship. And in the main event, it'll be between Edge and Undertaker in a tables, ladders, and chairs match for the World Heavyweight title. A star-studded card for next week's Rewind. Also, another reminder that this Wednesday at 12 o'clock p.m. on our Twitter and Facebook pages, we'll announce part 1 of our summer lineup for the month of June. We won't spoil it, but just know that we have an interesting mix of shows that'll be coming your way for the month of June. I think that pretty much covers everything I wanted to mention coming up. But before we get into Rewind number 26, I'd like to take the time and do something that we do on every Rewind, and that's give some backstory as to how the show all came together. The backstory. So this will be the 5th pay-per-view of the year so far for the WWE in 2008. And it's been an interesting so far. 2008 for me has been in a lot of ways an underappreciated year in a lot of ways, but outside of WrestleMania so far, there hasn't really been a lot of great pay-per-views. There hasn't been a bad one, but the Rumble, No Way Out, and Backlash were pretty much average shows at best. So here we are in May of 2008 with the 10th annual Judgment Day event. The main event program was over on the Raw brand between the WWE Champion at the time, Triple H, and challenger Randy Orton. These two have obviously had quite the history even before this period. Triple H was the leader of Evolution. Randy was one of his proteges, one of his students.
Then he go on to betray Randy.
Orton at SummerSlam in 2004 had won the World Heavyweight title, which led to Triple H becoming jealous of him and unceremoniously kicking him out of Evolution. Not going to lie, it's weird thinking that Triple H was the heel and Orton was the face in that feud.
And not to mention that this feud would happen, pretty much exactly a year later.
Yeah. So,
So these two would have definitely a long history together, to say the least.
They'd feud for some months in 2004 and early 2005 for the world title. Then that would end. Over time, it resurfaced, such as in 2006 when it was DX versus Rated RKO, or in October of 2007 in No Mercy. But this particular feud would start up once again at the 2008 Backlash pay-per-view the previous month, where Triple H would defeat Randy Orton to become the new WWE Champion in an elimination fatal 4-way matchup, which also featured John Cena and JBL. Then the following night on Raw, Orton and Triple H would face off in a championship rematch, but it would be interrupted by the Raw general manager at the time, William Regal. He would announce that at Judgment Day that the main event would be Triple H defending the WWE title against Randy Orton, but it would be inside a steel cage. For the SmackDown brand, the main program would be between Edge and Undertaker over the vacant World Heavyweight Championship. The feud had been going on throughout the early part of 2008. Of course, at WrestleMania 24, these two would headline the show in what was one of the greatest WrestleMania main events I've ever seen. They'd also go on to have one of the best rivalries of this year. And one of my favorite Edge and Undertaker feuds for both guys.
Yeah, probably the second best feud of this year. And the only reason it's not the best feud is because we get an old-time feud between Shawn and Chris.
Oh, yeah, hands down. This is number 2, but nothing replaces number 1. I think in terms of the matches and just like the encounters and stuff they had, like you could argue of being number 1, but it's just in terms of like a bitter rivalry where like two individuals just hate each other. Nothing tops like Shawn and Chris, yeah, for sure. But the most recent matchup, getting back to Taker and Edge, the most recent matchup between the two heading into the show was at the Backlash pay-per-view in April, where The Undertaker would defeat Edge to retain the World Heavyweight Championship with the Hell's Gate submission hold. Then following that, on the May 2nd edition of Friday Night SmackDown, General Manager at the time, Vicky Guerrero, would strip Taker of the world title, claiming that the Hell's Gate was an illegal chokehold, and she did it to protect others from the move.
So Undertaker was stripped, obviously. Can I just say that before we go any further?
Mm-hmm.
I actually had a bit of a problem with this because when Undertaker beat Edge with it at Backlash, the move wasn't banned.
No.
At that time. So he won the match fairly, and then the move was banned, and he got stripped afterwards, even though when he used the move, it wasn't illegal. I understand Vicky's a heel GM, and she's trying to help out her heel husband and all that, and they're trying to break the rules. I felt like that was kind of stupid. Yeah,
I could agree there. It's like make it where if he does it again, then you strip him of her, then you take it off of him.
Yeah.
After the rules already in effect.
Yeah, it didn't really make sense to me. It was kind of like, I guess that's kind of a cheap way to do it. Also, can I just say, I completely forgot, Vicky Guerrero had so much heat around this time.
Oh, God, did she ever. She had more heat than, almost like anybody in the business.
She had more heat than Edge.
Yeah. At this point in time, I would agree, yeah.
I mean, we'll talk about it later in the show, but when she comes out there, she can't even talk because people are so mad at her.
Yeah. No, she was great. She was great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so this is maybe the only part of the feud where they kind of, it wasn't one of the better parts. Obviously leading up to Mania, I mean, that was awesome.
That was amazing.
And then even though going in the Backlash, that was great. But I guess going in here, it's kind of gotten to the part where, after they stripped him of the title, it was kind of, it was kind of it wasn't one of the highlights of it. But I mean, I guess I still overall just love this feud just because I really enjoy Edge and Undertaker, two of my all-time favorites, probably number 1 and 2 for me.
Yeah, they're up there. Taker's up there for me too, and so is Edge, obviously.
So then the following SmackDown, the May 9th show, Vicky would announce that at Judgment Day, Undertaker would face the winner of a championship chase where the winners of their matches, I guess they'd have these matches and whoever would win they'd advance. They'd move on to a Battle Royal where they'd go on to compete for the vacant World Heavyweight title against Taker at the pay-per-view. Originally, it would appear that Batista would be the winner of the Battle Royal. That wasn't until Vicky announced that there would be one more participant left in the match, which would turn out to be none other than Edge, who had a medical miracle, she would say. And then he would run down to the ring and spear Batista off the ring apron to the outside and win the Battle Royal. And and then he'd go on to Judgment Day to face Taker. Another notable feud at this time was actually in its early stages was between Shawn Michaels and the Intercontinental Champion at the time, Chris Jericho. This program had started between just Shawn and Batista, over Batista being upset with Shawn retiring Ric Flair at WrestleMania, but Jericho would find himself in the middle of it. He'd have his issues with both men and would be placed as the special guest referee in the interpromotional matchup at Backlash between Batista and Michaels, which also... for me was that match in particular was a very underrated match. But I think a lot of people may actually forget that Shawn and Batista ever really feuded, honestly.
Yeah, they had good matches, too. I think it's just that, one, it was kind of woven into the Jericho-Michaels storyline, which we all remember as being this crazy big feud.
Uh-huh.
And I just feel like it was kind of woven into there, and it was around that time period, so people kind of forget about it.
Yeah, that could be. I could very well see that, because I thought it was a good route to go from Mania. Because I mean, after he had retired, Flair. I mean, I guess if you look at people he had been close with, I mean, there's Orton, but I mean, he's the top heel champion on Raw right after Mania. Then you got Triple H, who'd become a big baby face, and it's kind of Shawn and Triple H was a great feud, especially in the beginning, but after a while it just kind of became overkill because they just did it way too much, and it went on for 2 years, almost. But so I guess Batista was really the only logical answer, because I guess the other thing is Triple H was going to still feud with Orton, and so yeah, so you had that there, and then I guess Batista just didn't have anything to do after Mania, so I guess that he'd be just the perfect guy to fill that spot with Shawn.
Yeah.
So, their match they'd have was also very underrated, and I'd recommend checking that one out if anyone gets the chance. In that one, Shawn would pick up the win off of hitting the Sweet Chin Music, but he was able to do so by catching Batista off guard with a knee injury that everyone had thought he had suffered in the match. Then the next night on Monday Night Raw, the April 28th show, Chris Jericho, not buying it, would claim that Shawn had faked his injury, but Shawn would insist that it was indeed legitimate. Then Shawn would then continue to sell the injury for the next couple weeks. In the meantime, on the May 5th edition of Raw, it would be announced that at Judgment Day, Michaels would face Jericho one-on-one. Then on the go-home show before the pay-per-view, the May 12th Raw, Jericho, now believing that the knee injury was legit, would offer Shawn an apology and would give him the chance to back out of their match at the upcoming Sunday night show. During this, Shawn would reveal that he had faked his injury all along and would hit Jericho with the sweet chin music. Then on the...
Yeah, and then...
Sorry, you go.
Yeah. I was going to say that it was actually pretty funny, this whole thing. Just because, like, I don't know, it's funny that I guess they were both faces at this time. I really want to talk about Jericho because Jericho at this time in particular was really kind of like, I don't know, like
he was
lost as a character.
Yeah. I think at this point he was
like,
kind of going towards being a tweener.
He was because he was kind of doing heelish things, but he was still Y2J.
Yes.
So it was like, I didn't know, he was kind of in a weird spot. He didn't have the long hair anymore. He had the short hair. I kind of feel like they didn't know what to do with him until he got the Shawn thing.
Yeah, I agree, because, like, yeah, he was Intercontinental Champion, but, I mean, like, you know, I mean, maybe at this point it wasn't as so much the case. Like, I think mid-card titles served a lot more, obviously, than they do, like, nowadays with, you know, in modern WWE programming, but yeah, outside of that, like, outside of the title, I guess he didn't really have, like, a spot, so he just found his way into the Batista Michaels feud, and then he'd have the feud with Shawn. But I think it was also weird seeing him as Y2J when he returned in the late 07, and even at this point, because it's like it didn't feel like the original Y2J Chris Jericho.
Because it wasn't. He didn't have the long hair, and you know, he didn't have the same attitude. I feel like either.
Because in the beginning he tried using the same mannerism stuff, but it just didn't feel right.
Well, because you know what, it felt like he was an older parody of Y2J.
Yes.
Like, it was like, no, you're too old to be doing this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know? You can't have, like, a 30-year-old father go out there and be like, Stephanie, you're a hoe. Like, you can't, you know, I know he didn't do that, but I'm saying, like, you can't have an old guy like Y2J who's a father go out there and just be the old, you know, like, funny, you know, not really caring, not mature young Y2J in the 90s.
Yeah, because, I mean, I felt like that's how it kind of was with DX when they tried bringing them back in 06. It's like, I feel like they just got to, like, grow from here. Like, I mean, like, yeah, they're DX, but, I mean, they should have been, like, more aggressive and, like, a bit more mature.
Like they were when Rated RKO took out Flair.
Yes. That's what I wanted to see.
Yeah, but, so anyway, looking at this, I think and the crazy part is, I don't think anyone at this point saw it was coming with Shawn and Chris.
Oh, yeah, no one knew what was going to come from here. But then I guess the last part I was going to point out for this program here was on the May 16th edition of SmackDown, going back to Batista here. He would state that because Shawn Michaels had faked the knee injury, that he was going to hurt him. Then another feud to briefly mention is between John Bradshaw, Holyfield, JBL, and John Cena. Both of these guys having plenty of history dating back to 3 years prior. They would reignite their feud here in this part of 2008 at the Backlash pay-per-view. John Cena and JBL, as previously mentioned, were a part of an elimination fatal four-way match for the WWE title. And during this, JBL would be first eliminated from the match following tapping out to Cena in the STFU submission. And then the next night on Raw, JBL would challenge John Cena to a match at Judgment Day. This match would officially be confirmed on WWE's website, WWE.com. So that's all we had for the backstory. Now into the show itself. So this is, of course, WWE Judgment Day 2008. This was done by World Wrestling Entertainment on May 18th, 2008. So we're like a week removed from that, but, you know, it's just we're doing a lot of 2008 pay-per-views. It's kind of like a thread, or like kind of like a theme, like, I guess. So we're just like nailing them off right here. This took place from the Quest Center, now renamed as the CHI Health Center Omaha. That's the title of the building now. This was done, of course, in Omaha, Nebraska, in front of 11,324 as the recorded attendance figure. And it would